Good afternoon. Uh, Today we are presenting in SUG Columbus the session on Sitecore XM Cloud Forms. And we have today Kamruz Jaman and Mike Reynolds. These two are very big name, I would say, Sitecore veterans. Kamruz is 12 times Sitecore MVP and Mike is 10 times Sitecore MVP. So we have seen people working. They have been MVP for those many years, and number of times you come across any issues, you will find their blogs or their guidance. So today we are going to listen to some excellent session on Sitecore XM Cloud. What do you, Cam and Mike?
Okay, Mike, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Sitecore's XM Cloud Forms. It's a new form builder on their SaaS product, XM Cloud.
So a little bit about ourselves. I'm Kamruz Jaman, as Malik said. I'm a 12-time Sitecore MVP, and a lot of you might know me from the community as Jammy Cam.
I'm Mike Reynolds. I'm probably better known as the Sitecore Junkie. I'm the guy with the wizard icon that's all over the place on our community Slack and other places. I'm a 10-time Sitecore MVP. You can find me, come to user groups, eat free pizza, get free drinks, things like that. But I heard there's free pizza here and I don't see it, so I'm a little upset.
Not so many of the free drinks anymore, just fizzy.
Yeah, well,
fizzy water.
Fizzy water. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the history of Sitecore's forms stuff from way back when all the way to today and the evolution therein. Why would you want to use XM Cloud Forms? We're going to try to note out key features that come with the product now. Cam's going to jump into a demo and show how this thing works in action and possible future enhancements or even things that we want to see into the product later on. This is my favorite slide of the entire deck because it makes me think about way back when. So even before web forms for marketers, when people needed forms on their websites or Sitecore implementations, somebody would have to roll their own bespoke forms. And I remember doing that way back when, 2007-ish, just building forms, yet people wanted forms faster. It would take a long time. Developers had to jump in. It had to be put into some kind of timeline or whenever so we could start building it, deploy it, things like that. So Sitecore came up with something called Web Forms for Marketers to help content authors create forms without the need of developers jumping in and doing those things. Except that wasn't fully true. We had to jump in and build customizations to make it all work. Later on, people demanded this thing work on MVC because the world had moved off of web forms into an MVC sort of paradigm. So Sitecore built things to work in an MVC sort of framework. Later on, even further, Sitecore rebuilt everything brand new, which was called Experience Forms with a completely different form builder. A lot of feature parodies weren't, I would say, stacked up with the old Web Forms for Marketers module because that was in development for at least 10 years and Experience Forms was brand new. They kind of have been patching things along up until, I don't know what date, but still developers had to build things and make customizations and things like that. Then Headless World came into play, and so they started supporting that on JSS. And now today we're on XM Cloud Forms, which we're going to showcase today.
Okay. So we had actually presented Experience Forms back in SiteCon in 2018, right, Mike?
Yes.
And obviously, it's just been released towards the end of 2017, as you mentioned. So it was for us at the time, it was a brand new kind of module. It wasn't exactly a module because it unlike Web Forms for Marketers, this had got Experience Forms had been built into the actual core core CMS platform,
Yes.
right? So it wasn't
It's
a
part of the-
separate
it's part of the product.
installable.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, it was there was not a lot in there. There was a lot of things which we'd been so used to web forms and marketers, which had been built up over a long time, right? So 2009 to 2017, so a good 8 years, and these features had just been built up over time, and it had been refined over time. And then we were kind of landed with experience forms, and we're like, where's all the functionality, right? Where's all our submit actions? And I know you were missing really missing the credit card form, right? Because
that was my favorite.
who doesn't want to collect credit card information, right? And we like to buy nice things. But yeah, we'd also built some integrations for that user group conference, and we've actually rebuilt that for this demo here, and we can kind of talk about our experience, if you like, in going through and building that, because those integrations that we built it took a little while, right? It took a lot of digging to get those things to actually work, and to figure out how those things work. So we'll kind of talk through our experience of the then and the now with these experience platforms in essentially building the same integration.
Right. So why do forms matter? I kind of touched on this a little bit. Content authors don't want to go to developers to have things done. They want to be able to do their jobs quickly. So instead of having something put into a developer queue so that we can tackle it maybe in a Scrum, whatever, it'll be in a backlog, pull it in, commit to it for 2 weeks, reiterate, all that stuff. They just want to go build things so they can do their jobs quickly. Because in a world of business, things move really fast. You want to capture leads, you want to capture new clients and things like that. You want to get feedback from your customers. You want to do it really as fast as possible so that you can move at the speed of business. And at the end of the day, that's all it is. Interactive surveys is on there. That's what I mean. You can go out there, gather information so that you can say, okay, we need to make changes in our services or products so that we can kind of fill a gap that our competitors or we are providing. But waiting for development teams to do that could take not just weeks, but months, depending on what's in their queue, what's in their backlog, and things like that. It just makes sense to give them the power to build the forms without needing developer help to do those things. And developers are expensive, believe it or not. We are very expensive people, not just for at the end of the day, you just want to get it out there.
Yeah, and then I think also development and practices have changed over time, right? So if you're thinking back at 2009, 2010, I don't think a lot of our, I personally know that a lot of our CI/CD pipelines, for example, we didn't really use that in the same way as we do now. So now we can do one-click deployments and things, whereas before I remember there was a lot more steps involved, especially with Sitecore. Before we had any serialization tool, 2009, 2010, right? There was nothing. I think I recall TDS being released around 2011 or something, and then Unicorn around 12 or 13, right? So those cycles were a lot longer, especially back then in the web forms and marketers day, than maybe they are these days, right? Still long and unacceptable for most business users.
And then companies have changed management processes that need to be followed, which also can hamper delivering fast.
Yeah, sometimes just getting the approvals required through the approval processes for a deployment on a production site it can take some time, as you say.
So XM Cloud. So right here we have an example of the default template. We're going to dive into some of that stuff. This is what it looks like, but TM is going to actually give a deep dive shortly after we talk through a few things and features. But you can see that it actually, just this little screenshot looks pretty nice to me. I'm just thinking about food. That looks like food to me. I haven't had lunch yet. Anyways, this is a completely composable solution. So it's standalone. Doesn't tie in with the CMS. It just will, what you see is what you get. You build it. Whereas in experience forms, whereas for marketers, you could select items. Here, you are composed and stuck within one box, which is a good thing because you don't want to have an integration somewhere else that may be missing things. And next thing you know, everything's broken. Here, you have everything contained within one solution so that you can mitigate any risk should anything disappear. It definitely works in a headless environment. Actually, the whole thing is headless, to be honest. It's a SaaS product, so by default, it's going to work in that sort of fashion. Here it says no code, really, or low code. There's really no code. Come on, Cam. We know there's no code here. Everything is all through an API endpoint, and even that, you just click in buttons to create those things, and you're targeting an endpoint to collect the data that gets submitted. Nothing's saved within this solution. It's offloaded somewhere else, so you don't have to worry about that. Somebody else came up with a better solution to store data, so you don't have to worry about data being stored, encrypted, or somebody walks out with a hard drive, next thing you know, they're selling it on the black market or something. You don't have to worry about that here. Everything is just, you build it, you send it off somewhere else that handles the data better, and then you're happy. Everybody's happy. Just like in other, let's say, form modules or builders that Sitecore provided, here we have a nice builder or form builder, but here it's actually pretty sleek and it's very fast. Drag and drop controls onto a panel or a page, and you can just build your form really quickly and change labels and things like that, change validation right on the fly. You can look at things in different device viewports and things like that. And everything is within this one product. You're not going to integrate with the rest of the CMS. You don't have to worry about things going missing or breaking. And definitely, this thing is really fast. You're about to see that. So there are 15 types of fields available out of the box. Like I mentioned, you can set validation on those fields, make them required, or you can make formats required on certain things. I'm a little upset there's no credit card field, but that's okay. I'll get over it. You can style the form very easily within the form editor or builder. And you don't need a developer to do that. It's just what you see is what you get. As in experience forms, you didn't know what it was going to look like. You had to know, Bootstrap CSS to make that all work. And it wasn't going to look exactly as you were building it. You had to go and preview it and hope for the best. We don't have that problem here. Just like in other form builders, you can set your layout structure of your form. And these are all out of the box. You can just say, hey, I want multiple columns, or I want a full width of my screen, or I want to do, this wider here and this smaller over here. These all come out of the box and they're drag and droppable. And it's responsive. So it will resize based off of the viewport size, like mobile versus desktop versus tablet. That's what we expect today. We need that because different viewers or users are visiting your site using different devices. And here, multi-page support. So my favorite, the Wizard form, because I use the Sitecore Wizard icon everywhere. You can have users step through a Wizard form to do different steps of a form with different page numbers, and then submit at the end, and everything just gets sent off. And then, just as we saw in other form builders, but this one I think is way better, you have templates. So out of the box, you have things, you might be thinking, I don't know how to design this thing. You just go look at the templates and say, oh, this actually looks close to what I probably need. So you just start with it. You start building on top of it. You might have a nice background image, you might have, or colors or fonts and things like that, or it has fields that you need. You just take them and just start using them, repurpose them, and you're good to go. And this is what I was talking about with API endpoints, they're webhooks. So there are no more submit actions to save into a database anywhere. Everything is going to be a URL, and you're going to submit your form to that URL. It will capture all the form fields via JSON. You don't have to worry about sensitive information being stored into a database or encrypting that sort of stuff. You're passing that problem on to somebody else who is better at doing that than you are. And I'm not saying you're not good at it. I'm just saying that somebody else has already invented a robust solution and you can just tap into it.
This is also great for the marketers as well, right? Because if as soon as you put it into one of these iPaaS systems, Zapier, Sitecore Connect, obviously, right? That'd be a great solution to put it into. The content authors can actually then go and visually define what happens to that data instead of needing a coder to go and say, okay, I wanted to push it to our CRM. I want to send an email. I want to do this other thing.
Right.
It is quite. It's very, very flexible, right? It gives them a lot of power. Scary power, but a lot of power nonetheless.
Well, we want them to have power.
Yeah.
And just like in other form builders, there's a concept of pages where you just drag on your fields and things like that. I don't have much more on that. You can go to the next slide. It's very straightforward. It's just creating a page or adding a form to it. Yeah. And then now, just as brand new, Sitecore rolled in conditional logic so that you can target certain things based off of certain conditions, and you can maybe show in high fields and things like that. They had that in experience forms, so it made sense that they added this into XM Cloud forms.
Yeah, I think the great thing here, along with the next one, actually, I'll let you talk about the next one.
And yeah, here you can like do some styling much easier. And now there's an upload field for files so that users can upload files. That was missing. And this was just added, I think, to this month.
Yeah, literally like a couple of weeks back, right? And that's the great thing about both of these two things, right? So the first time we did this, we've obviously presented this before on an internal webinar. Mike joined me on that. And both of these things were not available at that time. The conditional logic, the styling, the upload fields. And this is great because now we're doing this webinar like 2 months later, and we've already got 2 additional releases with 3 new features in there. And the great thing is we didn't have to do anything, right? We didn't have to upgrade our Sitecore instance. We didn't have to update any modules. We didn't have to install anything. We didn't have to change anything. We just got those features, and that's we've talked about this, and you guys know this. That's the beauty about SaaS, and the constant updates that you will get as of when they come, and it's a continuous improvement, right? Always. So with that, we should go over to a little demo, right?
Let's have a look.
Head on over.
I see appropriate slide. You are praising DemoGuard.
That's it. Yeah. You can never tell with demos, right? And especially live demos, and this will be live demos. So, thankfully, it's not our instance, and we're not having to worry about code deployments. That always helps. So can you guys see the?
You can see it. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So from this one, all right. So the Launchpad in XM Cloud, I mean, it should be very familiar to a lot of us. It's very, very similar to what we saw in previous versions of Sitecore, slightly different icons. The good thing about the forms is it is almost in the same section as it's on the same kind of it's on the same section as the previous Experience Forms button, and it almost looks exactly the same. So it shouldn't be too unfamiliar to any of us. But once you do get into the application, so it is slightly different. We have our list of forms here available, and we'll kind of go through the process of essentially creating a new form. And so within the form creation wizard, it's again shouldn't be too dissimilar from the previous Experience Forms layout. We have a bunch of items, which is the types of fields that we have in there, as well as some basic components like image, text, spaces. There is a section here for custom. It's empty. We'll kind of discuss that a little bit later. The layouts, which Mike talked about. This I really, really like because we can actually just start getting in here and actually just start creating a form layout without having to really know anything, right? In the previous version of Experience Forms, you could do like this styling of layouts and stuff like that, but you would actually have to start adding in sections and then start applying bootstrap classes and things like that to get the 50-50 splits and stuff like that. Here, we don't need to know anything. I can just drag and drop, and all of that thing is like happening, and I can move these things around without having to you can just move these things around, and it just works. You don't really need a manual. You don't really need any tuition, if you like. That said, I can actually just start going in and start creating parts of parts of my form. It's also quite intuitive and quite well led. So I've got some bit of text here. You can see I'm just pasting that text in here. I'm pasting it from Word, but it's already recognizes some formatting in there. And if I want to remove it or keep it, it's nice little touches, let's say. I can then start going in and start adding some fields in there. Again, I've added this field, and straight off the bat, it's actually added in a submit button because those I'm going to need on. Probably don't want it there, so I'm going to just move that around. So email field in there, and let's add in a. There you go. Date. So I have some controls here. I can go ahead, obviously, start styling some of those as I want. Add a few colors in there just for the sake of it. I can obviously also change fonts. There's a number of these fonts available. I'll show you some of that in a second as well. Now, within the fields, I can go in. I have a name, which is the actual ID, if you like, in the background of that form field. I suggest you change it to something meaningful, programmatic meaningful as well. These are what will actually get sent when you submit your data to your webhook. So if you're going to leave these like out of the box names, it's going to get confusing very, very quickly when you're dealing with the data on the back end, and I'll show you that in a second. I will leave this one just for the sake of it to kind of show you exactly what I mean on that one. You can make fields required. You can also make fields hidden. And you can also add in some validation using regular expressions. You can set in character limits as well. You can make that shorter, for example. And you can see as I'm editing these things, everything is just being updated. I'm not having to save these things. It will just update automatically. So when I'm hitting required, it's showing that required text field up there straight away. I believe that one is optional, and then probably want the email. There's some validation. Obviously, it's an email validator, so there's already things on there that you can change. I can also go in, change the actual field styles individually. I can change the label styles. So if I want to make the labels different font color, for example, I can do that as well. Too dark. If I have specific colors that I've picked that applied it to that individual field, I can also just apply to all, and that will essentially copy all of those things across as well. You can update the placeholder styles, and then there's a help text here. I can actually just hide that because I don't want it, and then again I can apply to all, so I'm not having to individually go and style this entire form. There is a mobile view here as well. It's just a desktop and mobile in this one, but it will allow you to essentially create your forms in that mobile view, with that mobile view in mind. And then there are some styling options. You saw that little warning that came up, that little dialogue that came up about adding padding and things like that for mobile versions. Again, these are just suggestions as you go along. Mike mentioned multi-page forms. Actually, I'm going to add one thing here. I'm going to add a little recapture field in here, right? Mike mentioned the multi-page. Just go in, add, and your multi-page, it just copies across the structure that I've already created. It hasn't added the fields. I can obviously just go in and add fields back in here. It's a weird little thing where it will kind of put in these placeholders for the fields, and I can click on those fields and then select those fields. I don't know if I like that or not, but it's what's there, because you end up with this kind of duplicate kind of thing across both of these. So let's show you a couple of these multi-fields in a second as well. One thing you'll notice is when I added that extra field, it put in a next button, it moves a submit button back there. I also have a back button down here. I've also actually come up with this error, which is interesting, but it's also useful. It's telling me that the recapture field should always be on the last page, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because when I'm filling this form in, I don't want to fill in the recapture on the first page, and then by the time I get to the last page, that recapture has become invalid. So this makes sense. It's telling me that I should actually move it. Let's just remove that, because I want to show you another thing. If I go back and actually try to add the recapture on that first page, it actually doesn't let me do it now. It's saying it should always be on the last page. Nice little help, intuitive help, in my opinion. I think this is a really, really nice touch. But at this point, I can actually go in and add the recapture on that final form. So I talked about the styling across the form. You'll notice that obviously these ones are styled, but these ones are not, because these ones were done earlier and it hasn't applied across. You do have the option on the actual form itself to go in and set all the styles. So I can go in, there's a bunch of like Google fonts that I can kind of select or unselect from that list that I had. So if I don't want the authors to, if I only want to restrict it to like 2 or 3 font styles that the author can use, I can come and do that here. There are things like text settings, what color the text should be, what color field borders should be, what color, what the validation messages should be. All of that I can set from this global section. This will obviously help just keep some brand consistency and things like that. One thing I did notice is if I go and change, for example, the button color to, let's just make it something like that, right, to orange, you'll notice that the button doesn't actually change color. But what will happen is if I go and add the button back in, put it down here, at that point, it will apply that styling. So it doesn't retroactively apply the styling. It will only apply it once you drag and drop those controls onto the form. There is that new feature, the styling feature, the styles feature that was added. So I can actually go in, select a style that I already have, apply that to the entire form, and then everything within that form is now following that styling, right? The text, the controls, the buttons, everything. So that's a really, really good way of now applying that brand consistency across all of your forms. You still have to apply it. There's no default, unfortunately, but it's a nice touch to be able to do that. What am I missing on here? Okay, so we talked about, okay, so so one of the things that Mike had mentioned was composability, right? And this is a standalone product. So what this means is this is not hard tied back into XM Cloud or any other Sitecore products. So when we add these like lists, we have probably been used to going to this list selection and then having the option to either set a number of values or to select an item in the Sitecore tree where these values are driven from. We no longer have that option. We only have the option to set these values statically. We have the option to set a display value and an actual value that gets passed through, of course, but we can't select it from Sitecore. And it's a change, but it does make sense from a standalone composable product point of view. If we start hard coding this and allowing lists of items to be selected from within Sitecore, you're breaking that composable paradigm. It's no longer a standalone product. It's got that hard tie. I mean, you could argue that it's not really standalone because you need XM Cloud to use it. But that's, in my opinion, the approach and the reason for that approach that they've taken on this case. Good thing, bad thing, right? The same thing with like images. So if I go and drop an image in here, I can actually have a number of options for where I can select images from. So I can upload something from my local computer. I can direct link to something, and that could be a Sitecore image, or it could be something from Content Hub, for example. There's an integration built in with Unsplash and Giphy, where I can just go ahead and select some images. And there's also the options to connect to Facebook, Google Drive, Dropbox, Instagram, OneDrive. You probably wouldn't want to connect these to your personal Facebook accounts. You'd probably want to be connecting these to a corporate account, right? Corporate Google Drive, Dropbox, etc., which will then allow you to kind of have your asset repository within, or those files within your own organization that you can actually then go and connect to. I had selected some earlier, so just as an example, you can go ahead and that image. Oh, I hit remove. Okay, that's not good. But I can go ahead and select some images, and you can do some basic resizing, and you can style that image with some like border radiuses and things like that. You can even make it clickable by setting a URL, and obviously things like setting the alt text for accessibility purposes. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to run through these tabs at the top. So comments, there's actually no workflow involved on this. But what you can do is actually go in and start adding some comments on this, and then in theory somebody can come in and see, okay, there's some things that we need to resolve, and then you can, once it's done, you can hit resolved, and then that kind of disappears, and you can kind of see what the comments and things are. If anyone's used SXA, it kind of reminds me of the commenting feature available within SXA in terms of tagging from back then, that you could add like little notes and things on specific components. But it's not a workflow, but it gives you at least some feedback that you can have backwards and forwards between people. Mike mentioned the preview mode. You can go ahead and just see how the form looks in different modes. Versioning is available, so you can switch between versions if you need to. I don't want to restore that for now, but you get the idea. Conditional logic, again, I can go in and say when a specific field contains, does not contain, starts, is empty, is not empty. Can do this kind of thing, then go ahead and do something, right? So I can show a field, hide a field, make a field required, right? So it gives us some options there. You can add conditional conditions and ors, as well as doing like grouping. So it can get a little bit complex if you need it to. You probably wouldn't want to make it too complex. One of the interesting things was with things like radio buttons, for example, right? So radio buttons on those multi-select lists, I can go in, select those. It already knows the field type, and then you can say if is equal to, not equal to, empty, not empty, and then it gives me the options that have already been set. So if, for example, on my field. This is going to be a good one. But for example, I might want to add a field in there which is hidden by default, and then if somebody selects other, then I'm going to want to show a field which will show a short text, for example, and maybe it will also make that field required. So maybe this short text field would be like when you select other on the radio box, this pops up. I can then type in what my other suggestion is in this particular case. Okay, I'm just going to remove this one out because it's going to save me some, cause me some issues. Within the getting into the final tab within here is settings tab. I can go in and get a form ID, edit the form name, select a webhook. I'll show you that in a second, and then select a submit action, which is I can redirect it to a URL or just show a basic success message. Which leads me nicely into webhooks. We talked about webhooks earlier. I'm gonna just show you over here. There's this kind of generic website called webhook.site. You can just jump over here and just grab yourself a webhook URL, and then you can just post stuff to it, and you'll see that it becomes visible. I'm gonna go to the manage webhook. I'm gonna create myself a new webhook. I've got a number of different options here. So authentication options here of two basic API key. So I pick none. And just paste in that webhook URL. That's that. I can actually go ahead and just select that webhook. I can also now actually test this webhook, which will actually also allow me to test my form, and that form is not going to work because I'm missing some buttons from my earlier. What happens when you do things on the fly? Right, so now let's go back and test that webhook. So I'm going to select these are selected, go next, test. Right. I can now do my reCAPTCHA, submit that form. The form, this is within the actual forms application itself. When I'm testing these things, it will pop this window up, which actually shows me what it is about to submit to whatever the endpoint is, right? I mentioned earlier about those field names and why you should change them, because it will get confusing. This is exactly why. So if I actually set the names, it will pass that through as the actual variable name. If I don't, then it's just going to pass through whatever the default is. And as you start to build the form up, this is going to get confusing. It's going to get confusing here, and it's going to get confusing in whatever the end systems that you're pushing this data into. You're not going to have any idea, without coming back here and looking here, you're not really going to have any idea what text CB456 actually means, right? It's last name, we know it's last name, but you're not going to know that in the downward system. So update those is going to make your life a lot easier. That again, oh, it did submit. Okay, here you go in the background. So now this webhook site again, basic, there's no authentication, but you're seeing exactly what's coming through on the data from your form without having to deploy it and everything else. This will then help you obviously code it up and do what you wish to do with it on the other side of it. Close that. Mike also mentioned the template library. I'll just show you that as well. Time. So once I create a form, I have the option to actually go and create something from a template library. There's 5 out of the box. You can preview those, see what they look like in various modes as well. I can use these as a starting point. I can actually also use any of my own forms as a template to begin with. So I went ahead and created this earlier. When I go and save it, I can actually save it as a template. Let's just the same one in this case, but I can say that as template. And then when I go to my template library, it's available. I can actually now start using that as a starting point for my forms and start beginning, right? Again, I mentioned about these settings. If I've set these up already, then this will just, and I use that as a template, save that in the template. All of these things are going to be available when I start off on that template. I still have the option to go ahead and apply those styles to that particular form as well, right? Now, go back to those webhooks. So when we had done this presentation when we had done the experience forms presentation back in SubCon 2018 in Berlin, we had actually gone and created an integration which used a webhook and posted it into Slack. We had to write a lot of code, and we had to figure out a lot of things, how to make this work and how to create custom submit actions and what data formats and everything else that it was expecting. So for the purposes of this demo, we wanted to actually recreate that and see how hard or easy it was. So we did go ahead and do that. We created a very, very basic form here, just first name, last name, email, message. For the sake of this demo, I did again add in some conditional logic to say, if the first name is not empty, then make the last name required. And just for this demo purposes, I'll show you how that works. And then we went and created a webhook for this. It's just a Zapier integration, no authentication. It's very, very basic. And I'll show you that integration in a second. But while we're doing that, let's just test that form. And so message in here and submit that. So this is what we're expecting to get submitted. And I hit go, and it's successfully submitted. And then we get hey, it's been submitted. Great. So I'm going to head on over to our Sitecore Slack, community Slack. If it has worked.
No, Sitecore Slack?
On the Sitecore Slack, yeah, correct. So if you go to the web forms for Marcus's channel, assuming it worked. There you go. All right, we have a submission. So I just submitted this right now, and I'll show you how. There you go. Mike's just tagged you in on that one. So I'm going to show you how that worked, right? So we obviously have this form with a webhook. It's pointing to the Zapier integration. And if we head on over to Zapier, what I built is actually it's just a webhook. It's just a webhook. It's just a Zapier integration with two steps. It's got a catch webhook and a post webhook. I'm using a free version, so it allows me two steps, but I'll show you exactly what this is doing. So we have a catch webhook. You've obviously got a few different ones. You can types of event triggers. I can also trigger it off specific fields, but I don't need that. I'm just keeping a watch. I have that URL that you guys saw that I'm posting to. And initially what I had done is I had submitted this. You saw, actually, you just see there was one submitted a few minutes ago. But this allows this integration to say, okay, this is the data that's going in, and this is what I'm going to be expecting for this integration going forward. It doesn't do anything else. It just keeps a watch. It's just an endpoint that receives some data, and I'm selecting the record that I want to that I'm going to use throughout the rest of my integration here. The second part of this integration is actually just a post event. So I want to make a post to somewhere else. The action in this particular case is to a Slack endpoint. Put it to whatever you like. It can be another if you want to push it to something custom, I suggest using something like an Azure function or some other custom endpoint of your own. And you can obviously also set in things like authentication and things like that. What took me the longest here was actually trying to figure out what Slack is expecting to be sent to it. And in this particular case, Slack is expecting a parameter payload to be sent, and within payload, it's expecting a specific JSON response. So I've got some text. I formatted the text in how I wanted it to be displayed. And when I showed you in that previous step, it was saying, what data would you like to select? The reason is because this webhook is collecting some specific data. I can, as long as it knows the format, I can now go in and actually start plugging that in. I want to use this field that's coming in. I want to use that field that's coming in, and then I'm not having to do any coding. I'm just selecting from a visual editor as to what I wanted to do. You can also set in things like authentication and things like that as part of that call. I don't need anything. You can pass in additional headers and things like that. Obviously, this being Zapier, if you or an integration platform, Sitecore Connect would do exactly the same. I can actually start going and adding multiple steps in here. So if I want to send one email, add it into my CRM, add in another email, for example, I can go ahead and do that. If I wanted to push it into whatever integrations I have here, right, HubSpot, then I can also start pushing it into that, Sheets, Google Sheets, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. All of that will be handled here. You can obviously also start adding in some conditional logic and things like that if that's right. You can start adding conditional logics and handle the different scenarios and triggers that you need. It gives you a lot of power without having to do any coding. So I think it's very different than what we're used to, but I think it's very much the composable way and what we'd expect in this new and upcoming composable route that we're all on. Did I miss anything, Mike?
No, I think we got everything.
Okay, great. There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
All right, we are almost out of time. But
yeah, so we've got 2 slides and then we're done, right? So, Mike, take it away.
Conditional logic was added. It was just added recently, so we crossed it off. We're ready to go with that. Custom fields. So Kamruz showed a section that said custom. We think that custom fields may be coming along at some point in the future. Looking forward to that because I know a lot of people are going to need that because we've had to customize fields in most of these form building solutions. And then more analytics for our forms. You know, right now, there's not much there, if anything at all. It'd be great to see analytics on like dropout in fields or things like that so that people can change their forms depending on what customers are resonating or what's resonating with those customers and other things. And then a JSS embed code so that people can drop forms into different places using just a JavaScript snippet. Can't wait to see that. I think that's coming. But we also have a wish list field that we'd love to see.
We do. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. So would love to see forms be editable after they're live, because once you make them live, you can't edit them. You have to recreate them. That's kind of a pain. Right now, there's no way of archiving old forms when they're, when you're done with them and you want to say, okay, I'm going to create a new form or do something different. Also, managing forms through the API is a great thing to do. Definitely would love to see something like that. I hope Sitecore is listening. And migrating forms across different environments definitely is something like that right now, but that'd be a wonderful thing to have. And then bake-in webhooks through Sitecore Connect, so in using recipes to get that to work. And then AI, because everybody's talking about AI. Love to see some AI in this.
And that's it.
Questions?
Yeah, I kind of realized we did skip a couple of bits around like the pages integration and like the activation of the forms and stuff. yeah, apologies. We're a little bit late in time, but I don't know, you might have to shoot, Mike, but
Yeah, I have to run. I'm being called into a meeting.
Okay,
but I can. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
If anyone has any questions, then I can actually take those from you guys.
So no, hence I think all I had you kind of, because I was thinking about all these missing features and wish list things that Mike showed at the end.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, and
anyone has any questions?
I think with the speed of things that they are releasing, like they seem to have been releasing something new every month. Hopefully, some of those things will get addressed, especially the multilingual one, because that's a big one for us, right?
Yeah. That was one of my main question actually.
Yeah.
Anyone has any question?
I have one question. So you had shown the condition where I can select something based on that I can show and hide the forms, but I don't think so. I have a option to show and hide the whole block. Like
no. Correct. Yeah.
So I want to do it through PayPal or I want to do it through credit card. So I want to display the credit card block or PayPal block. So that's not available, right?
Yeah, so like these multi-page, for example, right? Yeah, it only does it at the field level. It would be nice if there was something at like a actual entire page section, right? So hide this page instead and skip that page or show that page. That make the wizards a lot easier to manage rather than have to do. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do they have a container kind of thing, like you have multiple fields in a container and then you can hide and show them something like that?
I mean they have their layouts, but their containers or those layouts are not selectable. You can only select field.
Yeah.
This at the moment. Yeah. So again, this is like hopefully good feedback for Sitecore, and they can start looking at those things, right? And I did mention like the forms. I just want to show you this, right? So to actually use a form, I need to make it active. Now, the problem is this action is not reversible, right? As soon as I make that form active, I can actually no longer edit the form, which is like super annoying because if I made a typo, I can't edit it. If I wanted to add a new field or remove a field or change a condition, I can change the logic, but if I needed to change something on that field, I can't do it. My only option is actually to save it as a template or duplicate it, right? Which is not great, right? Because if I duplicated it, now I've got to go and find out where that form is used and then replace the form essentially, which in the case of pages, if we go in there.
You can't even change the hook URL?
The hook URL, let me take a look at that one, but from a pages perspective, what is doing that? Yeah, so the hook URL you can change, looks like. Oh, no, I can't. Oh, wow, okay. Oh, okay, since the form is active, are you sure you want to change it? Okay, so I can change the hook URL.
Okay.
Right.
That is good.
Yeah, but I can't, yeah, it's good. So again, hopefully this is something that they will like fix, I'd say, and like the ability to edit will come back.
And I don't think so the data is encrypted when we are posting it to webhook. It goes in the plain text.
Well,
yeah,
that's your responsibility now.
Exactly. So initially I thought, oh, maybe it's to do with like the form reports and things like that, but there is no form report, right? The data is going out to your webhook and it's for you to handle and do whatever you want with it. So it's not like I've got to, hey, download the form data, and they were kind of a little bit worried about, fields being added, fields being removed, and, dealing with that scenario. But yeah, it's not even that. So I don't know. I don't know the rationale behind that one, but hopefully that will get fixed, so to speak. Yeah, and there's the actual integration with forms.
All right.
pages.
Okay, so that way you actually embed it in the page.
Yeah, as soon as you activate the form, it becomes available in this list. And I did wonder because if you have a lot of forms, it could get quite big. But like there is the search here, for example, so I can actually go and restrict, find the specific form that I'm looking for. But that's how you embed it. As soon as you hit activate, it will just appear in the component section, and then you can just drag it and drop it. And there's really nothing more. This was one from yesterday, but there's really nothing more for you to do. You just publish, and it will just appear like magic.
So much better.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, right? It's a lot simpler and at the same time a lot better, in my opinion, with the webhooks.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for doing this session. It's a lot of things to learn today, and I actually saw a glimpse of it in the the symposium or the MVP summit, but this looks a lot better than that now.
Yeah, that was just, I think it was just screenshots back then, right? So I think it's quite nice to see in action now.
Yep.
Any other question, anyone? I can stop the recording.
All right, thank you.